Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Is everything okay with the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, Rohit Sharma from Nordwestschweiz Institute for Data Science in Switzerland, who is guest of our institute, will present work named Characterization of Weak Transient Meterwave Solar Emissions. Please.
Can you hear Rohit?
I cannot hear Rohit.
Now maybe yes. Now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Let me share my screen. Yeah. Can you see my screen in full screen mode?
No.
Not yet. Maybe now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeah, and thanks, Kaman, for the opportunity. And so today I will be talking about my work, which we did in collaboration with Divya Obrai from NCRA. And today I will be talking about characterization of weak transient solar meter wave emissions. And in this work, we make use of the data from solar data from Murchison Widefield Array, to be specific, and all the yeah. And I will begin by a brief introduction to Sun. So Sun, as we know, is our closest star, and it's a dynamic ball of plasma. It is really dynamic. I mean, the processes, the plasma processes which happen on Sun can range from millisecond time scales to days of time scales. So it really captures various types of plasma processes, and it's a very good laboratory of plasma. Yeah. So yeah. So it's a plasma laboratory in short. What we see in solar plasma is a diverse range of scales. These can be length scales ranging from kilometers to many hundreds of megameters, as you can see on the right hand side, in the eclipse, the white light picture from the eclipse. So you can see that there is a lot of structure, spatial structure that you see, and they are basically governed by the underlying magnetic field topology, and and the plasma which is residing inside thus creates this complexity which you see in the spatial domain. If you look at the intensity levels, there's a vast variety, there's a vast range of intensities of the quiet sun, which it can vary. Typically, in quiet sun and the active and the active sun, the flux densities can vary like 6 orders of magnitude. So there is a lot of structure in the intensity plane also. And if you look at the electron density as a function of coronal height, it decreases. a lot by many orders of magnitude. And if you look at the temperature, this is very well known problem called coronal heating problem, where the temperature drops a little bit in the photosphere, then increases a little bit in the chromosphere. So there's a chromospheric heating, and then in the corona finally it increases by 2 orders of magnitude. And this particular problem of why there is a hotter corona on top of cooler underlying solar surface is termed as the coronal heating problem. And there are theories relating to the flares, flare heating theories, the nanoflare theory, and then also the coronal wave dissipation theories to explain such kind of phenomena. If you look at the range of coronal heights, the temperature, density, and the magnetic field, they vary a lot. So subsequently, if you look at the radiation emission mechanism, the dominant radiation emission mechanism to be precise, it also varies across different coronal height. And this plots nicely summarizes the emission mechanism as a function of frequency and height. So at the lower coronal heights, where you have magnetically dominated systems, gyro resonance and gyrosynchrotron emission dominates. And as you go towards the low frequencies, then you see plasma emission mechanisms and Bremsstrahlung emission mechanism dominating. So this captures the diverse scales that we observe in sun. And if we and if we see in radio, this is the image which shows the radio image of the quiet sun at low frequencies to high frequencies. And the high frequencies, they come from much larger coronal heights as compared to the high frequency. So the low frequency, they are sort of like diffuse, and also the resolution elements also changes. But overall, the emission is pretty diffuse. And as you go to the high frequency, then you begin to see the finer structures which can be associated with the photospheric surface features, and also the hotter plasma from EUV. So yeah, so this captures the this shows the diverse scale of the solar plasma. And in radio, you can actually tune your frequency if you want to study the if you want to study the magnetically dominant systems which are in the quiet sun, then you choose high frequencies. And if you want to choose plasma dominated system, then you would choose a low frequency. So it captures a wide variety of laboratory plasma. So flares, as I said, it's are one of the very interesting phenomena which occurs on the sun, where there's enormous amount of energy which releases in a very short amount of time. And there's a lot of energy which is dissipated in the energetic particles, and also in the ambient plasma. And this is one of the prime candidate that there could be such kind of small scale flares occurring all over the sun, producing releasing lot of energy into the corona, and ultimately leading to the higher temperature, sustained higher temperature at in the corona. And one of the characteristics of the flare is the flare frequency curve that we see for various flare energies. And it has a negative slope, so which is about 2. And on the right hand side, you can see the flare frequency plot. And and one of the things for these flares to be to sustain a million-degree corona, that the slopes must be quite high. So you would get more and more flares at the lower energy and as compared to the higher energy. And so you would need more sensitive instruments to actually observe the lower energy flares. So and Murchison Widefield Array is one of those instruments which actually has as a very good sensitivity. And so Murchison Widefield Array is the radio interferometer located in Western Australia. It's a precursor of the next generation square kilometer array, and it operates in the range of 80 to 300 megahertz in the low frequency band, where Bremsstrahlung and plasma emission, they dominate. In the phase one, it had 128 baselines. Now in the phase two, there are more antennas. So it provides a very dense UV coverage, which ultimately increases the sensitivity and the fidelity of the instrument. For this particular data set that we are going to see, we will be looking at the phase one data, where the maximum baseline is about 383 kilometers, which produces an angular resolution of 3 arc minutes at 150 megahertz. And the time and the frequency resolutions are 0.5 and 2 megahertz bandwidth averaged for this particular thing. But you can image at the time cadence of at the frequency cadence of 40 kilohertz with MWA. So this is the plot of the UV coverage of the MWA, where you have these the dense core on the top. You can see the dense core, and the bottom plot actually shows the total UV coverage. This dense network in the center, in the core, actually increases the sensitivity and the fidelity of the solar images from MWA. So and there have been a lot of studies with MW data, and there are few which shows the presence of weak solar features. On the right plot, you see the presence of these impulsive features all around the spectrum, and this is from the white sun. There is not much activity happening at that time. So there is a lot of data at all frequency bands, from 108 megahertz to 240 megahertz. And it does not have any the fraction of emission is pretty common in all of those frequency bands. So not much frequency dependence here. And there is one more. And in the image domains, Surjit did this study in 2020, where he basically calculated the fluctuations in brightness temperature in the cells regions of the white sun, and found a lot of found basically a distribution of these fluctuations. Actually they correspond to a very steep distribution. So these are the indications that there are fine weak variations in the radio data that we have currently, and we need to extract them and image them, and trying to locate where they are currently, where they are happening. So, and one of the ways to do that is to actually do a visibility subtraction. So the model of the sun would be here is the sun consists of two components, basically the stationary component and the non-stationary component. So stationary component would come from the background active regions, from the background thermal Bremsstrahlung, which would be stationary over the time scales of, let's say, a few minutes to hours. And then non-stationary components are basically these flare-like, spiky-like things which occur on top of these stationary component. And if you take out the contribution of these stationary component, then you can actually look at the non-stationary component in great detail and associate them to say burst-like phenomena. So what we employ in this work is basically this technique, where we separate the stationary and the non-stationary component in the temporal domain. So we do this as a function of time. And the visibility subtraction has been used for many years, many decades now, I think. The primary objective of this was to basically take out the stationary component from the active regions. For example, if this is a flare, so on the right hand side, I'm showing you a flare profile where you see these spiky bursts. And if you want to locate these bursts accurately in the image plane, then you need to take out the stationary component. Otherwise, you will have the component of stationary and the non-stationary both contaminating the location of the source. This assumption is particularly bad for weak sources because the stationary component will have more power as compared to a, let's say, a very bright burst where the non-stationary component is expected to have a lot of power. So you need to do this in time, in temporal domain. And because the stationary component also evolves over tens of minutes, and so in order to take that out, you need to do it in temporal domain. So for this, we took the quiet sun data from MWA, and this on the left hand side you can see the UV map of the sun in 3 AIA channels. And you can see there is a presence of large coronal hole, but overall there is structure near the equator. But overall, there was no activity observed with the radio telescopes. And the dynamic spectrum, which you see on the right, are the 15 minutes chunks from the MWA data, and you see barely anything. So they are very smooth in time and frequency. So you would not expect any variability by just looking at the dynamic spectrum, but when you do visibility subtraction, then the things will pop out. So firstly, we made the images at these 8 frequency bands. So these are the images, 5 minutes averaged images for the sun, from 108 megahertz to 240 megahertz. And you can clearly see the variation of the solar the radio features that you see on the disk, and this can be attributed to the scattering problems. Yeah.
Okay, just very quick question.
Yeah.
These are averaged over the whole course.
Over the yeah. So we observed this in picket fence mode. So these are bandwidth averaged, the 2.5. Yeah. So yeah, so after employing the visibility subtraction, then so what we did, we take out this stationary component, and whatever is left, we image those components, and what we get is in the end is a 3D cube of the residual visibilities. And this 3D cube is basically 2 dimensions, 2 dimension of space and 1 dimension of time. And when you average them in time, then there are these interesting points of emission which pops out. For example, at 240 megahertz, you can see there are 2 blobs which are quite bright. And at 217, this blob survives, and this blob is a little fainter. And similarly, at different frequency, you see different kinds of features. So here, basically, you are averaging over the time in order to see which of the regions in the sun is actually giving rise to this transient emission. And the fact that we observe these emission all over the disk, and that says that there are these variations occurring all over the disk. So especially at the high frequency, at the low frequency, this is quite concentrated in few regions. For example, here at 108 megahertz. So these are the brightness temperature of these are pretty low as compared to what we generally see in the quiet suns. And yeah, I will come to that later. And if you look at the number of bursts that has been detected. So this is the plot. So there are more bursts detected from these spots, but overall the numbers is sort of like fairly uniform inside the visible disk as compared to the brightness temperature plot. So that suggests that there are these transient events occurring everywhere, but there are brighter events occurring near the bright near the bright spots. So that is one interesting finding of this. And if we overlay these onto the UV map, then you can see the correspondence of these bright spots to the active regions. So active regions are present in near the limb for this particular day, and you can see at 240 megahertz, 217 megahertz. So there is some frequency continuity. You can also see it in 179 megahertz. Then you have this continuity even at low frequencies, at the middle frequencies. Many of them are actually originating near the brighter UV regions, and some of them near the active regions. And one interesting thing here is you observe is at 108 megahertz, there is an emerging active region here, and you observe a corresponding bright spot here at 120 and 108 megahertz, but not at maybe slightly at 240 megahertz, but not in the intermediate frequency that much. So there is a lot of interesting thing which is happening at these frequencies. And if you select so I selected here like 6. So here the right hand side I show you the background map is basically 193 angstrom, and on top of that I plotted the 270 megahertz plot, and this red color is the 108 megahertz solar boundary at 5 sigma level. And I selected these points where 1, 2, and 3, they are sort of like associated with active regions, while 4 is a generic quiet sun region. 5 and 6 are like outside the solar visible limb, but inside the radio limb. So, and this is the time series of those the brightest temperature time series for those regions. And regions 1, 2, 3, they show a lot of transient activity. There is a nice burst which is happening at about this time. Region 5 and 6 occasionally have some intermittent burst, flare, some small burst, but the fraction is pretty low. So a lot of things are happening. And region 3 is associated with this emerging active region, also shows some very nice busty features. Now, so there are some interesting events here. For example, here this thing is actually a periodic burst. So you can see the brightness temperature is pretty low. It's of the order of 20 kilokelvin, and this is periodic, and the time period is approximately around 10 seconds. So there is some periodic injection which is happening in this burst. And then region 3 shows a nice type 3 burst, very weak type 3 burst. So here the brightness temperature is about 60 kilo-K, and you see this nice drifting drift across the frequency. So these are like the weakest type 3 burst that we detect in these data. And here I give a quantitative feeling of the brightness temperature for this burst and the number of bursts that has been detected at these. So if you look at the different regions and the brightness temperature, so they vary in the order of few kilokelvin to 10 of kilokelvin. So, and the numbers also vary from, let's say, few bursts to, let's say, 85 burst, which has been reported at the highest frequency. So there is also some variation with the frequency. At high frequency, we detect a lot more burst as compared to low frequency, which is also expected, given that the magnetic field strength there are the magnetic topology is also complex at the lower coronal heights. And one of the main sources of errors which can come in these is the self noise from the background, and the self noise estimate which we do is of the order of less than a 1 million 1 kilo K, and many of these features are actually above self noise level, so you can consider them as intrinsic to the variability of the sun. On the right hand side, I show a time bin versus the frequency. So these are the 2D histogram for the duration of these bursts. So the intrinsic resolution of the instrument is 0.5 seconds. So you can see lot for all the regions. Many of the most of the bursts are actually not resolved in time. So these are the bursts which are actually living which actually live less than 0.5 seconds. So and there are some which can go up to like maybe 4 seconds or something like that. So there is improved improved time resolution can actually help in getting the actual time scales of these bursts. But most from this we find that most of them are not resolved in time at 0.5 second level. And if we look at the fraction of burst which comes from the active region, we find that the contrary to the belief that most of these bursts actually originate from some active regions, we find that about 10 to 20% of these bursts only originate from the active regions, while the others are spread all over the disk of the sun, which makes them pretty interesting in context of, for example, like nanoflare hypothesis theories. So something needs to be investigated in this dimension. And then one of the things to compare is the occurrence rate slopes. So occurrence rate slopes has a variation across all the frequencies. For example, at 108 megahertz, so it was minus 0.5, and for example at 197 it was 0.6. So there is a variation in the occurrence rate slopes, and when we compare this to the type of burst, then the type 3 types of burst also lies in the similar range. So it's a mixture of type 1 and type 3 type of phenomena which is happening here currently. So yeah, so I would stop here. I mean, this would be the part where I would stop the visibility subtraction thing. And so this is the so I would like to conclude this part by saying that there needs to be more effort in this using this technique, because then you can actually extract out the weak features, not only in terms of their brightness temperature, but in terms of their location, which is very important. Because if you have the stationary component along with the non-stationary component, then the stationary component will smear out the actual locations. So therefore you would require to do this. The other thing which we are trying is basically looking for using using a simultaneous study with the X-rays, because some of these features may correspond to a larger flare which can be seen from X-rays, let's say. So that's the argument which comes from the fact that you have these standard models where you have the electrons, the ejecta going up, producing the meter wave wavelengths, while the other ejecta going down, producing the thermal Brainstorm X-ray emissions, hard X-ray emissions. And with sensitive enough instruments, you can actually probably image the hard X-rays and the meter wave types of bursts. And using so this is this is the diagram of the sticks which is on board the solar orbiter mission, which is currently going around going around the sun. It is producing a fantastic sensitivity. It has a very good sensitivity. They routinely observe this type of A burst, A class burst, and so therefore, if especially at high frequency where you are more closer to the corona, you would expect some kind of correlation between X-rays and radio, and that is something which we will be going to investigate. For this, we took one of the data set we observed with MWA, that was in 2019, and at that time the sun was not very active. We detected one flare which was with sticks and in radio. And when we look at the positions of the position of the X-ray sources, they were very near the limb. So so it was actually observing from Earth, it was behind the limb. So there is no way that the radio interferometer could have detected those, but there was something which was temporarily correlated, but this was occurring at two different places in the sun. So there is there is more effort needed in this to do such kind of studies, and STIX and MWA are probably very good instrument to do this. So I will basically conclude now, and just to say that visibility subtraction is in temporal domain is very good technique to detect weak bursts, especially during the quiet sun, where in the quiet sun we detect milli-SFUs features very routinely, and also not only the milli-SFE features, but very interesting features like very weak type 3s and the periodic emission, periodic burst, such kind of features are also detected. And these features are above the self-noise levels, as we demonstrated. And in the end, there's more effort needed to basically do some kind of conjunction study with other instrument. Yeah, I would stop here and take the questions if you have any. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. Now is the time for questions and comments.
Can I ask a question? Very quickly about how you choose the background for the subtraction.
Mm-hmm.
You select some period before the onset of an event. How long is that? And if you have an extended series of events that goes on for tens of minutes, is it permissible to still use that period that's half an hour before the onset of the events or more?
Right. So visibility, so in time, so if you have a time profile, so time profile it changes as a function of time, and it changes over some time scales. So in the event that we observed, so we see that it was changing over the time scale of 5 minutes or 4 minutes. Here we were interested in imaging the second level variabilities. So here we were the impulsive events were restricted to lie between the instrument resolution, which is 0.5 seconds to 20 seconds, because I choose that particular window and subtract it in order to basically remove the background. So it was kind of like a running median type of thing, which is done. Yeah.
And a very quick second question. You averaged obviously over quite relatively wide region and frequency.
Right.
Do you think a lot more can be learned if we went in more detail and not average over frequency? And would that affect this technique of visibility subtraction somehow?
Yeah. So here, what we the visibility subtraction is done in the temporal domain. So for each frequency, for each channel, you would do this. So you would construct basically a stationary model for each of these channels, spectral channels. So certainly you will learn a lot more because you're looking at more data. But it has, so for this, but that will also take a lot of disk space, and computationally it would be little challenging to do that. I mean, if you have to do it for, let's say, hours of data, then that would be a lot of data. So we averaged in frequency to avoid that.
Okay, but do you expect to learn more about nanoflares?
Yeah, so then you can do you can see the changes in the frequency domain also. So for example, I showed you the histogram in the time scales of these features. You can do that for the frequency if the bandwidths are less than 2 megahertz. So for those features, you can maybe characterize
And potentially start constructing spectra.
Yeah, you can see the spectra also. Yeah, but most of these what we find is narrow band, so they have pretty steep spectra. So yeah, so depending on so plasma emission mechanism, in plasma emission mechanism you would expect such kind of things, but if you get a like a type 3 type of thing, or maybe gyrosynchrotron source, then a spectra would be very useful.
Well, some other questions or comments, please.
Yes, I have a question, please. First, thank you very much for the presentation. My question in slide 19, there were figure with spectra for the yes. So I was wondering what can these spectra tell us about these phenomena? Yes,
Right. So this is spectra. So this is just a for the so there are two things. So one is so the histogram. This histogram tells you about the content of these features as a function of brightness temperature, and if you can somehow relate brightness temperature to the electron temperature, assuming some models for the opacities, then you can learn something about the electron distributions. But those would be under the assumptions of the opacity thing. Here in this case, since the variation is large, so that is something which there are two ways to explain that. One is basically to one would be the absence of the burst in some of these brightness temperature bins. So it could be because since we are looking only at half hour of data, probably if you look at more than then these would be refined and you would get a more robust slopes, or yeah, so basically these are just to compare these particular transient burst with respect to what has been observed now previously with for example type 3s and type 1s, and where do they lie in the entire context of the classification of the burst. Yeah, and we find a lot of variation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ryan, please.
So I have a couple of questions, Rohit. Just on this slide that we're on at the moment. I was under the understanding that you required at least a slope of 2 for it to be some kind of impulsive activity, for it to be some kind of flare. So anything that's less than 2, I see 0.86. Is that saying there's no nanoflares at that frequency?
Yeah, so that is what I said. Like so,
yeah.
Here for this particular frequency, for example, so this is only half an hour of data. So in order to build a very concrete understanding of what is really happening, you would have to look for a larger amount of data and at a varied solar activity levels. So this is just only for half an hour of data. In this half an hour data, you do get the slopes which are less than -2, especially for the low frequency side. And at 108 megahertz, it's quite nice because there you see that particular type weak type 3 burst at 108 megahertz. But you do not, in this half an hour, the type 3 burst did not occur. For example, let's say for 197. So you do not have any points in between 10 to the power 5 to 10 to the power 6. So I would regard this as the limitation of the this half an hour window. If we observe for more, I think we will fill up these bins even better. Yeah.
And then I just have an additional question. I think it's in relation to slide 13. So I just noticed in these that as you're going to lower frequencies, you're seeing less of these impulsive events going on. Is this, I know you mentioned something to do with the height and the corona. Is it also due to a reduction in sensitivity? Did you find a limit in sensitivity in relation to frequency?
Right. So there is a variation of sensitivity also. That is correct.
Do you find any
Also,
lower limit to this that you couldn't detect anything below, or?
Yeah, so here the thresholds have been given for each frequency bands because the thresholds are very, very different from across frequencies. So I would not expect same level of sensitivity for different frequencies. So so maybe many of these features which may be present at even weaker levels are not being captured. So so there is a sensitivity limit associated with each of these images, and I think maybe here not here. Yeah, I have a table, but probably I have not put it in this presentation, but which actually gives you the sensitivity limit for each of these frequency bands. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Dr. Murphy, please.
Hi, not quite a doctor yet, but thank you. Thanks for the talk, Rohit. I have more of a technical question on the visibility subtraction itself, and I was a bit late, so sorry if I missed it. But how do you account for, so like we have a time difference between time 1 and time 2, the position of the baselines in the UV plane is going to be different as well, and I was just wondering how you account for that. Do you take the average position between the two, or is there something simpler?
Yeah. So so the change in the position, so so that will impact the UV plane, right? So the changes in the UV plane, it will get reflected in the measurement sets. So what you basically do is basically you approximate, you fit a polynomial for each of these baselines. So and try to basically extract out the stationary component. So it is sort of like a baseline based approach which we are adopting currently. So kind of like an averaging, you can say. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that will also put the limits on this particular technique, and those limits are actually will reflect into the images. So therefore you have to be pretty conservative in order to give the thresholds. Otherwise you will get many such features.
Okay. Some other questions or comments? If there are not, let us thank again Dr. Sharma, and I want to take
You are muted. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks everyone
Very nice seminar.
for this very nice seminar.
It
will be uploaded at some point online so people can watch it. But can I please ask Oleg, Mohammed, and Rusitsa to rejoin again in 5 minutes and listen in so we can have a discussion. Thank you, everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.